Right, working again. Splendid. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Antony Carpen here on, I think this is episode number 5 of Cambridge, the Shaping of Our City. Or Cambridge, Shaping Our City, depending on what title I want to run with that day. Currently crossing New Square, having just crossed Christ's Pieces, even. And I'm on my way to a music rehearsal. And I thought now would actually be a good time to make just a quick run through of the Kite. Now, this area that I'm walking through at the moment used to be a car park. And it's, I think, if I recall correctly, Cambridge's only Georgian Square. So you can see the houses all around it. And funnily enough, back in 1998, in one of the houses just over there, I met up with a group of friends, one of whom who lived in that house, and we all went to our leavers ball from college, because we'd just done our A-levels, and we hired a white stretch limo. And it was in the days before hiring white stretch limos for college balls were a thing. And as it turned out, the cost of actually hiring that white stretch limo for about 8 of us was cheaper than other people who hired fleets of taxis, which I thought was quite funny. It was on the day of the England-Colombia game in 1998, and they said they would take us from one stop out to, I think it was Sawston Hall, and back again, hence why it ended up cheaper. Anyway, we're currently wandering towards the Grafton Center, but actually this street here, Fitzroy Street, is one that's undergone huge changes over the years, and what we have with the Grafton ahead of us used to be a solid working class community before it had its heart ripped out. It was a very controversial development. Ooh. Gotta watch for cyclists. I'm just going to switch the camera around, because what we have here, although it's the big Wilko store, is the old Laurie McGonagall's store. And it was one of the biggest department stores in the historical city. Like many, unfortunately, over the years, if I can call them, the local signature department stores of many a city have been lost. Cambridge is no different. I remember one, I think it was Hannington's, down in Brighton, where I used to live, which was around for a couple of years, and then that disappeared too. And so what happened, really throughout the 60s and 70s, the city authorities and the government were trying to decide how Cambridge should expand and where an alternative shopping district should be. And they decided, after years and years of wrangling, that it should be here. Now, the other building that's worth looking at is this one. This is the old Eden Baptist Chapel, or just the old Eden Chapel, which has since moved back down to the other end. This is the Grafton Center as is, but they're going to be changing the roof around. And as you can see, just behind the next door is actually what's left of the old working class community of the Kite. And the debate really at the time was around whether you should, I guess, gentrify the place, because there were a lot of housing slums and rundown places, but certainly from when you look at the archives and you look at the protests from the time, it wasn't kind of like beyond help. But the powers that be at the time decided no, they were going to flatten it, and that's what they did. A lot of people were moved out to council estates in and around Arbury at the time, when before the developers moved in. But it was quite a long-term decline that happened, and actually can still see as we walk down Burley Street, which is where most of the charity shops are nowadays. You can still see remnants of what the old Kite used to be like. And I'm going to take just a slight detour off it, just to give you an idea. In fact, actually, one of the longest standing stores down this road, Bose & Co.'s, if you look at the architecture there, you can see, we can get a glimpse of perhaps what it was once like. But it's the shop that's Forbidden Planet is now in, which for me is one of the gems of this part of town. In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing significant, but it's one of the buildings behind the trees there that actually survives. Now, I'm going to head towards Adam and Eve Street. You get the theme of what used to be a market garden. And when I was younger, all of this area that we're moving into, because you can detect a bit of a theme here, because we've got Paradise Street, Adam and Eve Street, Eden Chapel, and that gives a historical hint as to what this area used to be. And it was around this community that much of kind of like 1700s, 1800s working class Cambridge really grew up. Now I'm going to go down here because there's a very, very interesting building that has since been converted into flats, and it's the old Jubilee Hall, and I only spotted it a few weeks ago and was just like, oh, who left that there? Or who put that there even? And it's this one here. Lovely building, like I said, now turned into flats, like many things here. But actually, I don't say that in terms of boo flats, because one of the things that struck me ever since I started making this series is how Christianity kind of rose and fell throughout the 1900s, or really from a peak in the mid to late 1800s, and then it just really collapsed after the Second World War. Now, the other place that we're going to walk past again is a very historical building that many people don't really know much about its origins, or even that it exists, even though its existence is on the name of the building. And it's this building, just here. And this, ladies and gents, is the Tram Depot. And it's now a mainstream, actually is it mainstream? I think it's an independent, actually, but if you look at the pub sign, it was Cambridge's Tram Depot that had That's better. That had, or hosted, or even sheltered, all of the trams that we used to have, because we used to have horse-drawn trams. Now on East Road, Anglia Ruskin University behind me, which is where I used to go to many moons ago, after my 3 years in Brighton. We've also got St Matthew's Primary School over there. And funnily enough, a few decades ago, they had a really, really big protest because this part of East Road that we're now on, or that we're currently on, as you can see, is a single carriageway, but there were plans to turn it into a dual carriageway. The dualling bit being further up. Funnily enough, the pub that we've just walked past, the Duke of Cambridge, which is just there, that used to be called the Baker's Arms. And when I was 16, that was the pub at which I bought my first pint on Bonfire Night 1995. We didn't see much fireworks. We were just told this is where we've got to meet, and we did. And I had never been to a pub before. And so when I got to the bar, I was just like, I have no idea what drink I'm going to buy, because nobody had told me. So I just picked the brand name that I was most familiar with, and at that time, Guinness were selling lots and lots and lots, or rather they were paying for lots of TV adverts, a couple of award-winning ones as well. And given the Rathmore Club in my neighbourhood, which always had Guinness signs out, I was just like, okay, I'll buy one of those, please. I'm now going to go into somewhere called CB2 because I'm hungry, but we'll be back soon. Right, and food all over and done with. Thank you very much to CB2. Let's have some fun and games on the screen there. Now, I'm on Norfolk Street, which is where CB2 happens to be, and on the other side of the camera is what I call the boat race. It's also been taken over by the Snug, just like Jack Overhill's local, the Spread Eagle. Now, the boat race was one of Cambridge's premier small music venues, and it was quite sad to see it go before I had the chance to actually see anybody there. I'm looking over here onto what looks like a very derelict set of gardens that have been run down, but actually there's a kind of fairly sizable housing estate just behind the camera, and many moons ago, working on a Prince's Trust project, we cleared this area and planted lots of daffodil bulbs. And like I said, this was nearly 15 years ago, and if you come back every spring just around this silver birch tree, you'll see lots of daffodils planted in a square around the tree. I know this because I planted them. Now, I'm just going to pop over the road again to have a look at what's on CB2's, because this gives you just a snapshot of some of the things that happen here. The reason why they fascinate me is because currently going through the archives, I'm seeing a lot of similar adverts in the papers for the various entertainments that were happening in those days. And I can imagine those of you who are watching this in, let's say, 50 or 100 years' time might be thinking, yeah, what counted as entertainment in Antony's time? Seemed to be lots of blues and twos happening around here. earlier this evening, probably about 15 minutes ago, 3 police cars with sirens blaring and lights flashing just shot down this road at top speed. Just over there is St Matthew's Primary School, and this is just over here the post-war estate, because they, again, a lot of the housing that was there before, so the archives tell me, looked very much like that, and a fair amount of it in that part of town was slum housing in a state of disrepair. And so as part of the slum clearances, oh hello, as part of the slum clearances, they got rid of them and created that estate. We've got also the Box Cafe, again one of these, if I can call them, micro-industrial estates. And turns out we've just stumbled across, but we really shouldn't interfere, a raid. Coming to a newspaper report, probably in the next 24 hours or so. But as I said, my line with official police work like that is keep out of it. Leave that for the professional reporters, because I don't want to go to jail for making a mistake of being ignorant about the law. What we have just over there, and actually I'm going to cross the road for this, is Alex Wood Hall. Alex Wood is former councillor in Cambridge, and the local Labour Party decided to name this hall after him. No poster boards in hall, thank you. Well, lights obviously are clearly on, so they are plugging away, ready for the next election, no doubt. Actually, it's an interesting time for the Labour Party, both nationally and locally, with all things leadership campaign. Just down there is the passage through to the old cemetery, and as long as you're not scared of ghosts or stuff like that, it's one of the quietest, the most chilled out spots in the city. It's a real sense of calm, even though you know that 6 feet below are lots and lots of dead bodies. Now, this is another interesting local building. This is, I think, the old St Matthew's Primary School. Lovely little building, and you can see, very, very interestingly, everything was segregated. So that's the girls' entrance, and further down this way is the boys' entrance. And funnily enough, in fact, we know it's St Matthew's. There's the boys' entrance. We know it's St Matthew's because just there is the foundation stone. So I'm just going to see if I can zoom in so you can get a better look at it. Yay! There you go. Erected by voluntary contributions in 1871. And interestingly enough, this used to be the electoral ward of St Matthew's. Now part of Petersfield, but with the changes to the local government boundaries for the county council elections, it looks like the ward of St Matthew's might be coming back. Now, the militant secularist in me is just like, grr. name it after something secular. But in terms of the history of the area, actually, just from the naming bit alone, it makes sense. The bit that doesn't make sense with the changing of the ward boundaries is that the county council and the city council's ward boundaries, because we've got two councils here, the city council and the county council, their ward boundaries will no longer match, which is stupid, if you ask me. Now there's a very interesting road. And now if you remember in Jack Overhill's diaries, he spoke about how Cambridge got bombed during the Second World War. And the first road that got bombed during World War II is this one. And it was actually quite tragic what happened down this road, because 9 people died. And that was, kind of like in one sense a real wake-up call. The other really nice building, actually, that's also here, switching the camera around again and ignore the flashing light, is St Matthew's Church. And I love the architecture of this lovely octagon. And it's very rare to see buildings like that in Cambridge, which for me is a shame. My criticism of current modern architects is that they've just got lazy and are building buildings really that reflect the short-term profit motive. So basically, what is the minimum they can get away with for the maximum profit for whoever the developer is, rather than having any real sense of civic pride. And again, it worries me. I don't know why it does, but it does, in terms of what future generations of our city will think of my generation with the buildings that are currently springing up. And one of the reasons for that, as well as money, local people just don't have the time to do the detailed scrutiny and examination of planning applications and planning policies in the way that the professionals do. And to do it really well, you've got to be, just extremely determined and educated as well. And the other thing is the systems are so convoluted. Anyway, this is another old primary school, which is now a music therapy centre. And so we're now going to go in and sing for the evening. So I'll see you soon.